the host of Created in the Image of God, a series that examines the role of religion in society, from messianic returns to the emotive responses transmitted through our culture. Wade fearlessly addresses reality claims from all directions, objectively exploring their compatibility with Holy Scripture. Joining him is Daniel Sanderson, CEO of Planksip, an international philosophy and cultural media outlet, helping emerging thought leaders with personal branding by co-creating organic content. Tonight's episode, The Transformative Traveler, with Michael McCarthy.
I'm really happy to be back in studio with Michael this evening. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Michael, I would say, over the last month. And if there's one thing that I know about Michael, is that the man loves to travel. But I have to warn everybody, it's not the typical traveler. This man has a lot of exciting stories, which we're going to delve into a little later in the show. And as typical fashion starts to set in and we allow the show to start to unfold, we're going to realize that the same rules apply to Michael as any other guest that appears on the show. I, myself, and the viewers really want to know about Michael. They want to know where he came from, what his childhood was like, and what made Michael Michael. So that's a pretty hard one to delve into if I just left it at that and allowed Michael to freestyle. Instead, I'm actually going to ask Michael just a couple of questions. And the first one is, Michael, where were you born?
Well, at the time, I didn't know any of that information, but now that I'm a bit older, I can think back. Montreal, Quebec, Canada.
Okay, all right, okay. What decade was that, Michael?
Well, I get a senior's discount these days when I go to the store. 1950.
Okay, right on, okay. So you come from a particular background in Eastern Canada. Now, excuse my ignorance, this is a little bit off script, but do you remember in Montreal like a breakdown in Law and Order? I seem to remember reading a Steven Pinker book at one particular time where the police were on strike. Do you remember something about that? I think it was in the 70s.
Yes, it was, I think, the late 60s. And it wasn't the police on strike. It was a separatist movement by the French nationalists to secede from Canada and create their own country. And in so doing, they resorted to extreme violence, blowing up various institutions, kidnapping a cabinet minister and murdering him, kidnapping the ambassador from Great Britain. The prime minister issued martial law. There were tanks in the streets. We didn't have a tank on our street, but our neighbors did. And it was a rather nasty piece of business, yes, indeed. But I think in my particular instance, it was a blessing because as an Anglo in a French state, I couldn't get a job and I couldn't get anywhere. So I left and started my global travels then, and I now live in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada.
Okay. Well, thank you. Actually, that's firsthand. That's very interesting. One of the lessons that came out of that particular Steven Pinker book that I was talking about is the need for a regulating force, a leviathan, if you will. That's very interesting. Maybe Wade will delve into that a little bit more. Your childhood. This is what I'm interested in. What kind of child was Michael in his elementary years? Were you an easy lad to get along with?
I've of course been a traveler my entire life, and my first memory, actually, I love the phrase, "You wouldn't believe anything I say if I didn't have a photo." So the first photo of me was as a child, 3 years old, on my tricycle, heading up Hickson Boulevard with my mother running after me, shouting, "Come back!" I have an insatiable curiosity, and I've been exploring deeply geographically my whole life as a child, walking the streets, paying attention to the houses, the trees, the traffic. Um, older as a teen in Montreal, walking every street and paying strict attention to the architecture, everything that I could see. I've been doing this since I was born. Maybe it's genetic, I don't know, but the grass is always greener on the other side, and I am addicted to learning.
Mhm.
Everything in front of me is just magical. I can't go out the door without looking and commenting. My wife thinks she's on a endless Robin Williams experience. I don't stop talking. Look at that! Look at that! Look at that! Yeah, I've been doing it my whole life.
Wow. Well, any sports in your background? Did you play any sports as a young lad?
Oh, yeah, extremely lucky to live in a community with incredible recreational opportunities. I didn't know it at the time. I thought it was normal. I thought everybody had this. We had a park a block away, and I started skating when I was 3. Started playing competitive hockey when I was 6 against teenagers. I am a world-class athlete in a number of sports. Hockey, I played football up to the professional level. I did track and field for 10 years. I hike mountains. I'm addicted to my bike. I mean, I cannot go more than a couple of hours without a good sprint. At my age, I'm quite capable of playing against world-class players in hockey, and I'm 50
Mm.
years older than anybody else on the team.
Wow, good for you. You still have a league. I seem to recall in an off camera conversation. Was that the case? You organize a league?
Yeah, I do, and it's just like transformative travel, actually, because I do it for 2 reasons. I do it for everyone, and I do it for me, because if I didn't do it, it wouldn't exist. And it's the best hockey of its kind in Canada. I mean, everybody on the ice is fantastic, and they
Mm.
tolerate me at my age because of my experience and smarts. There's no way I'm as fast as a 22-year-old, but it's a two-way street. It's like transformative travel. It works for both sides, and that's why I do it. I love. I'll do it as long as I can.
Okay. I'm fighting the urge to get into the transformative travel part of it because this is really what we're going to delve into after the break. So help me explain to the audience what like how would your friends describe you? That's what I'm trying to get some real personal relational explanation about who Michael McCarthy is. Your friends, your colleagues. You used to work in a newsroom. You've been a broadcaster. You play in sports. Tell me about what your friends how would they describe Michael?
Well, that's a good one. I can't speak on behalf of them, but if I start talking to them about who I am now, which is a travel writer, whatever that means, the basic response from anybody who's read my books or seen the videos is, "You're nuts." I don't risk my life anymore. My
Mm.
wife gets upset when I do things like that, but I mix extreme adventure with visits to the world's most remote places, jungles, way off the beaten track. That's really what interests me. I don't like big cities. I don't like modern tourism, any of that stuff. So, yeah, I guess you could say I'm crazy. But one of my recent books explained ways to overcome fear. It's all about overcoming your fears and phobias. What scares you? Go out and do it. The first time I started doing that, I was instructed by a very talented mentor, the editor for National Geographic. And he said, "Michael, you're middle-aged. You can't do these things that the kids are doing to get into magazines anymore. You can't jump off the top of a mountain without a parachute. what scares you? What's always bothered you? You know, go out and do it. So I said, well, I almost drowned when I was 3 years old. I was terrified of going in the ocean, and nobody really enjoys getting eaten by a shark. So the first thing I did was go diving with great white sharks.
Mm.
I challenge you to do that. And I've continued on doing that for many years. So I look back now and I say, oh, I'm really lucky I'm still alive. I should have died maybe 10 or 20 times, but I'm older now, so I know better not to do that again.
The great white shark situation, you're facing your fears. I mean, so how did you handle that? I mean, can you describe I mean, you're a writer, right? Can you describe the feeling of the shark circling you, or what you were going through? And was it the lead up, or was it actually in the moments where the sharks were there? How did you cope with a fear of such magnitude?
Well, yeah, I wrote about it, and the story goes, you know, as a reporter writing for a local magazine, I was taking notes and photos, and the dive leader said, "I've been doing this for 22 years. I've never seen anybody do what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm measuring the cage, because you go down in a cage, you know, with the sharks." And I said, "Well, I want to know how big the spaces are between the bars." And she said, "What for?" I said, "Well, I want to know how much of the shark is going to get in the cage, because I'm in the cage and I don't want them nibbling on me." So when I got in the cage, my fear of drowning was far worse than that of the sharks. So you are given a tube to breathe through to the surface. And I was in the cage 20 minutes before I remembered I was in the cage. I mean, I was just hyperventilating, being underwater and breathing. So I didn't really think of the shark until I came to my senses. And then I looked around and I said, "Oh my God, what do I do if the great beast shows up?" Thankfully, it didn't. But after I got back on board, there was a predation, which is to say a shark attacked an elephant seal right off the side of the boat and tore it to bits. You know, 6,000-pound animal ripping a 700-pound seal right in front of us. And all of us on the boat were like utterly horrified, saying, that could have been us.
Mm-hmm.
So things that seem really scary, when you do them afterwards, in retrospect, you got rid of that phobia. Go on to your next fear and attack that one.
Okay, so you've overcome that, so to speak. Did you feel that you've conquered that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not afraid of water anymore, but going on to other adventures, you find other challenges. Like when I went on a trek across the Himalayas, 30 days above 15,000 feet, crossing all these multiple 20,000-foot passes, the doctor refused to give me certain medications. First of all, he said, "Look, you're stupid. What are you doing? You're going to die. You don't go up to that elevation that quickly. You have cerebral or pulmonary edema. It kills all sorts of people." But I talked him into giving me some medicine, blood thinners or whatever they were. And I went and did this insane trek. And in retrospect, I would never do anything as stupid as that again, because I almost died 4 or 5 times. Well, more than that. The altitude will kill you. And falling off the side of a cliff with a 7,000-foot drop off is also bad for your health. So, you know, you just got to list those things that, if you're an adventure traveler, as I was before becoming a transformative traveler, which is even more exciting, you've got to say, okay, what's next? What else am I afraid of doing? So I've kayaked with humpback whales and picnicked on icebergs and done all sorts of really stupid things, just because I felt like it. The adventure was interesting to me, but then gradually over the course of time, I stumbled accidentally across this genre that I called at that time transformative travel. And if you Google the name now, you'll find other people also doing what I call transformative travel. But if crazy adventures are exciting doing what I've done in schools, prisons, town dumps, old folks' homes, whatnot, is far more
Right.
exciting.
Michael, we're going to get in. Yeah, we're going to get into that. I want to remind the audience that Michael has a book, several books, but one book in particular that you're willing to give away for a simple exchange of engagement. And so you may know the drill. If you find something that's interesting, please put it in the comments. Engage with Michael. Michael will be reviewing these comments towards the end of the show, and he'll be picking or selecting from the comments one lucky submission that will get a copy of his book. Okay. Now we're getting to the point in the show where I want to remind everybody to continue to participate. We're going to go to a commercial break here. We're going to go to a commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to have Wade back in the studio once again. Make sure you like and engage in the show comments, and when we get back, we're going to have Wade delve into this interview with Michael much more extensively and much more intimately. Okay, so hold on, we'll see you back in a little bit.
In a world filled with wanderlust, where every journey is an opportunity for change, Michael McCarthy invites you on an unforgettable expedition. Transformative travel: how to change the world on your journey through life. Discover the power of human connection and how to make a meaningful difference in the world. Few people regard travel as a learning experience. Travel broadens the mind, wrote Mark Twain, and indeed, it does. The world is fascinating, and Michael loves sharing secrets about mindful travel with others by illustrating many of his interactions. Enjoy these unique teachings and practice them yourself on your next journey. Remember that all of life is an adventure. Transformative Travel: How to Change the World on Your Journey Through Life, by Michael McCarthy. Available now on Amazon.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us tonight. As Dan already mentioned, we're very appreciative of you here. For those who would like to make sure they get a copy of that book, there's a QR code. You can use your phone, your device to scan that. It'll take you right to the page where you can buy it. You can also get it really anywhere books are sold. So, Michael, it was really wonderful to have the opportunity to listen to you and Dan and think about where I wanted to go next with this. I wanted to first really quickly go way back because you and I had a chance to get to know each other a week or so ago. You told me a little story about what to me seemed like your first travel, your first voyage out into the world. And I'm wondering if you might share that with the audience again. It was a story about you on a tricycle at age 3.
I just came back from my daily bike ride. If I don't sprint hard for an hour, I go a little willy.
So you're still riding that bike. It's not a tricycle now, though,
No,
is it?
all the way up to a hybrid now. You know, I hate getting flats when I'm out there, right? I got a hybrid. I think I just mentioned to Daniel, it could be, genetic. I mean, when you're 3 years old, what do you know? But I was riding that little bike around everywhere as far as you could. I recall my brother, older than me, got a 1-speed. I was about 6 or 8 years. And I had to chase him in my tricycle. And then we upgraded. He got a 3-speed and I got a 1-speed, and I could beat him on my 1-speed. There's
So your desire, it was something about your mom like chasing you and you not wanting to come home or something?
Yeah. Come back, Michael. But no, Mom, look what's up here,
You were overcoming your phobias even then, or perhaps didn't have them yet.
No, I didn't have a phobia about bicycles, but you got to watch out for the traffic,
Yeah, absolutely. So then I was also very intrigued by the great white shark story and this idea of kind of maybe thrill. I mean, on the one hand, yes, overcoming phobias, but there's got to be a certain amount of maybe thrill seeking that plays into that as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm not a foodie. I like to eat, but there are people who are fascinated with food. They're chefs, and they like to cook. And so at the bottom of the pyramid, you'd say, well, where do you start? You go to McDonald's for a cheeseburger, and then you work your way up a little bit more from there. And I don't know where you end up in the far end with Anthony Bourdain or whatever, but it's the same thing with travel. I started off, I read On the Road by Jack Kerouac as a teenager, and I started hitchhiking on hopping freights. I didn't have any, not a penny. And then when I had a few dollars, Greyhounds. And when I got older as a teenager, I was homeless for a couple of years because I just traveled. I just slept in fields in the bottom of telephone booths and whatever. I just insatiable lust, curiosity, what's next? The fact that I didn't have a penny. One time I left home with $1. My mother said, is that going to get you 3,500 miles? And I said, well, I don't know, sure. And I would tell people, I'm willing to work. I'll cut lawns, whatever you need me. But
well, my son has introduced me to personalities such as Mr. Beast, and there's another guy who did a daily video blog about crossing America with a penny to get to see. So there are younger versions of these people, such as yourself, who have used social media and the internet to turn this into a career where they're trading. They start with a penny, they trade up, and somehow they make it all the way across the entire nation. And along the way, they're gathering funds through the internet. It's interesting to see how that's morphed and evolved. But what I wanted to get at was the thing that occurred to me is the transformation within you, because I as well had perhaps a little bit of that travel bug. I got a one-way ticket out of college to Europe, and I went with a suitcase and my one-way ticket and very little in my pocket. I had a work permit for Sweden, but I didn't actually have a job really when I was going to get there. So just took off. So I get that, but then this sort of adventure and thrill seeking, there's a certain amount of, well, I don't want to overstate it, but a certain amount of selfishness, right? What one personally wants to experience, what one personally wants to get out of this, right? Nothing wrong with education, and travel broadens the mind, and education is critical and important. All of us need that. But I sense that the move from the kind of travel you were doing as an adventure traveler, as I think you called it, towards a transformative traveler where you're really looking somehow to make a difference and contribute versus just experience. I'd like to dig into that a little bit, where that comes from and what your thoughts are on it.
Yes, well, like food, you move higher up the food chain. And while I was doing tourism, writing in newspapers about tourism, but I was on the side doing my own adventures. Yes, it's selfish. Yes, it's thrill seeking. And I was much younger then. But I stumbled accidentally across some people when I'm living in Vancouver, but I lived in San Francisco for 7 years. And that's like a global village. There's people there from all over. And I met so many travelers and travel writers. And I stumbled across this one guy who was doing what I would call microphilanthropy. He was a university professor at Berkeley, and he started a project where he said, look, on my next trip to Asia, I'd like to experiment. If you can chip in $5, $10, $20, I'll spend it on your behalf. And then I'll tell you where it went and why, and how I chose it and chose that. So micro philanthropy. So I met extensively with him and some other people doing the same thing. And on my next trip to Asia, I started practicing it. And while falling off cliffs on adventures or swimming with sharks is dangerous, playing with people's lives by playing God, as my friend was accused of by the media, showing up like Santa Claus and giving out this money, is far more dangerous. And the successes are life-changing. The failures are equally threatening, because if you make a mistake, it's real. It's real. Like my friend told me, and I learned so much from him, hundreds of examples. It's in my book. Here's one. He's in India, And he walks down the street in New Delhi, and there's a guy with a broken leg and crutches leaning against the wall. Mark doesn't give him any money. The guy's begging. He goes to get a haircut. Now, Mark's bald. He doesn't need a haircut, but barbers are like, hairstylists. They know everything. So Mark says, "Has that guy really got a broken leg? Is that a scam?" "Oh, yes, he's got a broken leg. I can tell you that." So Mark goes back and talks to the guy. "How can I help you?" "Oh, I'm trying to feed my family and everything else." So he gives him $20. Next day he walks by, two guys with broken legs. Uh-oh. Goes into a grocery store, asks some questions. "Are those guys really got broken legs?" "Oh, yes. Gambling, oh, mafia, lots of money. Stupid people come by and give them money. Very prosperous, Oops. So he managed to get a few people's legs broken by trying to be kind. So I got hundreds of examples of that, and of what amazing differences you can make in people's lives with very little money. But you better know what you're doing, because in my mind, it's not about giving. It's about sharing. It's about being 50-50. It's about being equal. Okay. I'm not with a sense of power with money going to give you anything. Okay. We're going to share this experience and see how it turns out. So when you do some of the things that I've done, have shaken me to the core, and thankfully turned out well. But you better know what you're doing when you start messing around with people's lives, because really bad things can happen. But when you get it right.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit more. That's fascinating, and thank you so much for sharing. It's something I've had a tiny bit of experience with myself in India and struggled with. So I think this is a very enriching conversation. I was recently thinking, actually just this morning and yesterday, about the idea of power. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I was thinking about, why that is. And a part of it has to certainly be that the wielder of the power doesn't know how to use it, right? And that the best of intent isn't good enough. And whatever, there's this old example of, if you want to get to the moon, but you're a tenth of a degree off, by the time you get there, you'll be thousands of miles missing it and flying off into outer space.
Yeah.
You have to be absolutely true, absolutely pure. And whatever flaws there are in your logic, whatever biases there are in your thinking, in your ideology, in your approach, whatever selfishness that might have been there in the thrill-seeking adventure for me side, that then gets transferred into the, oh, I want to do good side, that motive is not necessarily pure either, right? There are different reasons why people, simple terms, hypocrisy and virtue signaling, right? Two words that we're familiar with. So tell us a little bit more about that experience and that wielding of power, and how going to nations where, we are privileged, we are rich compared to them in material means, and money certainly confers a degree of power on whoever has it relative to the other people around them. So dig into that a little bit deeper, and how not only your friend, but you began to maybe discern a little bit of wisdom into how to use this power and turn it into sharing, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I love that word, wisdom. Look it up, look in the dictionary. What does it mean? I did a long series of trips to indigenous First Nations villages in British Columbia, the poorest of the poor. And I created a system whereby we delivered libraries, books, computers, high-speed internet, and completely transformed those villages. But like you say, people do things for virtue signaling, to say, I'm such a good guy. I'm not a goody two shoes. I don't do charity. What I do is share. And you get this sense of power about, coming in from the outside world and doing these kind of things. And then, you leave. Dangerous business. You have to understand, and it requires research. Really, you just can't drop in on someone and say, "Oh, I got some money. I like to help." You got to watch out for that ego. You've got to, think about the long-term complications of what you're doing. And what I do in my book, Transformative Travel, is I'm not a teacher. I'm not that kind of person. I share anecdotes and illustrations of all the things that I've done. And I think that's the best way. I'm a storyteller. I think the best way to share wisdom is to sum it up afterwards in retrospect and say what happened. I can share so many examples of it, but you also have to wonder how many people in this world want to do transformative travel, have the courage to do it, and especially when you mess up badly. When I went to my trek across the Himalayas, I wanted to go back and deliver medicine again to all these people. The children especially were dying, 50% death rate, from being so poor. And I heard, and I met with the health minister, we're going to do this tremendous project. And he said, "Oh, the last time a goof like you came in here, handed out all this medicine to the chiefs, what does the chief do? Puts it on the black market, sells it all. People take all the drugs, die, overdose, and then they kill the guys that brought it in, the stupid jerks that did this." So, they paid an ultimate price for their ignorance. So, wisdom, I used to have a definition for it. It's like the acquired bits of experience and knowledge that are shared with other people. So that's what I'm trying to do, is not tell anyone what to do, but to, do your homework. And the person who's transformed, is basically me. Of all the people that I've met.
Absolutely. Let me introduce one of the themes from the show. Our regular viewers will know the show is called Created in the Image of God, the Role of Religion in Society. And we've talked a lot on this show about how religion must inspire and never coerce. There are examples throughout history of religion becoming dominant, becoming coercive, and becoming the problem rather than the solution, right? And so that idea of inspiring and never coercing, right, came to my mind when you talked about not telling people what to do. And yet I assume that some have been inspired by your work, by your books, by transformative leadership. So share a story of somebody who was inspired to emulate the teachings that you put forth in your transformative leadership or transformative travel work. And what did they gain from it experientially? How did it work out for them, sort of putting their toe in the water of this thing that you've turned into a life's work?
Okay, somewhere before adventure travel, which morphed into transformative travel, I did this incredible journalism experiment before doing all this travel writing. I was working in radio, and I met my wife, and I moved to Vancouver to be with her, and we're still together 35 years later. And
Congratulations.
It's hard work, isn't it?
That's transformative.
Yeah, but I went around to all these radio stations, and I said, do you require talent? Because I can do it. I mean, I can sell ads, I can write ads and produce ads, I can interview, report, spin records, anything. And they said, we have no interest in any of that stuff. We are only looking for superstars in certain areas. I got quite annoyed. And I said to my wife, I'm going to show what I can do. And I'm going to start a project on homelessness. And I'm going to create a street newspaper. I'm going to employ people that would be begging on the streets of Vancouver, and I'm going to turn them into sales agents, and I'm going to put their stories into my newspaper, and I'm going to give a voice to the voiceless. And she said, well, that's nice, but you have no job, and you're not on welfare because you're living with me, and your car's in the carport because you have no insurance, and you're doing everything on a bicycle, and you have no office, and you have no phone, and you have no experience, and you have no staff, and you have no budget. And I said, well, that's irrelevant. what I'm going to do is going to transform the city. And she just laughed. And I wrote the whole newspaper. I talked to the graphic artists. I talked to everybody, and I put together a street newspaper. And I told a reporter at the national newspaper about it, and it came out. And the next day I was on the front page, and I did over 500 interviews in 20 countries. And I put over $1 million into the pockets of the poorest people in Vancouver. And I transformed the way people look at homeless people, because I had them on the street as my agents, talking to guys at the stock exchange in $1,000 suits, arguing politics. And it spread. A lot of people picked up on it, and it's spread all across Canada. And now people look at homeless people differently, because I humanized them. I gave them a voice. So people started copying it everywhere. And it's still going. I mean, I don't do it. I've been doing other things for the last 20 years. But it just does my heart good to see street-involved people standing there talking to everybody else and breaking down these barriers.
Well, that is an amazing story. And I want to cut to commercial break, because the segue is too good to pass up on, for our sponsor, Something or Other Publishing, because the idea behind Something or Other Publishing is similar to what you just described. So maybe they're one of the ones that copied what you did, from the perspective of allowing those who may not otherwise have a voice to get a voice. That's the author part of Something or Other Publishing, which helps authors crowdsource their readers before they publish, and works with them to deliver the best book possible in an author-driven model. Not to give the whole ad away, we'll cut to that in a moment. But when we come back from that word from our sponsor, I want to talk a little bit more about that experiment, and maybe get an example or two of somebody from that time that you may have stayed in touch with, and what they went on to do after that experience, what that growth led to in them, where they took that opportunity, if you will. Everyone stay tuned. We'll be right back. And do not forget to continue to put your comments in the chat, because we will be giving away a copy of Michael McCarthy's book, The Transformative Traveler, later on in the show. Stay tuned.
And welcome to Something or Other Publishing, or as our friends like to call us, Soup. Soup is a platform that connects authors, readers, and service providers in one convenient place. Choose Soup if you're an author with a great book idea and you're looking for a publisher offering hands-on coaching in some of the best royalties in the business. Or if you're a reader who enjoys engaging with celebrated and emerging authors. We already have over 3,000 of them, and more are joining every day. You can even win free books by voting on their book ideas. Or maybe you're a service provider and you're looking to engage with over 3,000 authors. We're here to help. So whether you're an author, a reader, or a service provider, you're in the right place at Soup. Contact us at help@soupllc.com to learn more.
Or use that barcode on your phone. It'll take you right there. Hi, I'm Wade Franson, the host of Created in the Image of God. I'm here tonight with Michael McCarthy, travel writer, journalist, and author of The Transformative Traveler. Right before the break, we were talking about your, I'm looking for the right words here, your vision to transform the city that ended up garnering world attention, even though, as your wife was quick to point out at the time, you had nothing, not even insurance for your car. So you started it on a bicycle. Wasn't that tricycle you were riding around at 3 years old, but it was still a bike. So that began perhaps many experiences and journeys for you. But I'm interested in, who have you stayed in touch with from that time that might have been homeless or helping you with the homeless, and how did that experience transform them? And what did they do with it? Where did they go with it?
I still see some of those vendors on the street, but I have not really kept in touch. I moved on from that experiment in journalism, for which I won the Ethics and Action Award by Canadian Businesses for Social Responsibility. I moved on from that to do bigger projects. But look at this wonderful technology that we have, that you and I can talk to each other around the world, and you can share this with so many people. So along the road, I discovered Skype. I don't know if that's still around. I guess it is. I was able to phone my wife home from Kathmandu in Nepal for 30 cents. I don't know what long distance would have been. So I started a show with SATW. It's called, they're still there, Society of American Travel Writers. It's a very prestigious organization. You have to have 100 articles published before you can apply. Well, I had a couple thousand, so, but I put an ad on the bulletin board there saying, how have you made the world a better place on your journey through life? What have you done? And I was amazed to find that virtually every travel writer that I met or corresponded with had a charity or a project or something they were doing. So I did, like, we're doing a 1-hour interview now. So I did 1-hour interviews once a week for a year. I did 50 of them. And I'm so sorry that I didn't understand technology at the time, because they went to iTunes or someplace and they finally went into the void. I wish I had them still to put them in my book, because all of those people that I met were doing amazing things. I met a woman who was talked to anyway, a woman who was 85 years old who had virtually eliminated child prostitution in Nepal. And I said, how in the world did you do that? She said, oh, it's easy. I bribed them. Every family, I gave them a goat. You sign a legal document saying you will not sell your girl into prostitution in New Delhi. I will give you the means to support yourself forever. And she did thousands of them. She reduced the prostitution rate 95%. And that's just one of 100 other examples. So there's people doing this type of thing, but they don't have access to publication or the books that you're talking about, the book that I wrote. And, you know, whether it's this show, video, print, or anything else, they're just tools, the ways that we can communicate with each other. And we don't need to rely on other people to do it. If you're inspired to do something, do it.
Great advice. Not coming from Nike, but coming from Michael McCarthy. But I love that slogan. And so I'm going to quickly go to a question from the audience here, because I think it's timely. What fears do you still have to overcome?
You have a list? You have a pen and paper? You know, people ask me, how are you doing today? I say, well, got a pen and paper? Let me list it. Lots of fears. I had a guy come to one of my workshops one time on transformative travel. And he said to me, look, I wouldn't have believed anything you said if you didn't put it on the slideshow. And, you know, I just watched the video and, you know, photos. You have proof, you know, that you've done this. Why in the world are you not world famous? I mean, you make Indiana Jones look like a Girl Guide. The stuff that you've done, you're nuts. I said, oh, you're hired. You're my agent, you know.
Well, you need to do Dos Equis commercials. Isn't that it? Isn't that the world's most interesting man, the Dos Equis commercials?
But, you know, there's a vision, the description of success in the modern world is rich and famous. You go back to the 1930s, there was an actress named Mae West. And she said, I've been rich, I've been famous, rich is better. So my phobia is success. I don't want to be discovered. I don't want to be rich and famous. All I want to do is connect with other people like you who share the same interests. So I'm afraid of success because, you know, power corrupts. And all power corrupts ultimately. We can see that all the way through our society. So, you know, I don't need to manifest anything that I need to make, just through the way I operate. Money's not an issue to me. And power, oh my goodness, what a dangerous drug that is.
Well, there's a quote we could use in this regard. It's actually from the founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah. And the quote, I may or may not get it right here, but it is, with fire, we test the gold, and with gold, we test our servants. And I've thought about that because there are lots of different things that could mean. And, obviously there's the thought that, yeah, you get rich and it corrupts you, right? But there's also, what happened to the gentleman who got $20 or whatever it was and went and gambled and broke his leg, right? It wasn't that he became rich and powerful. It was that having even a little bit of money that one didn't know how to use caused one greater misery. And I guess it's an interesting yin yang thing about wealth, right? You've got some of the world's richest men who are doing things, and oftentimes they're political, right? Not to get political. I'm not trying to get political at all, but on the right side of the ledger or the left side of the ledger, on the conservative side of the ledger or the progressive side of the ledger, whatever terms you want to use, you've got these extremely wealthy men who are trying to change or reshape the world according to their ideology, their ideas. And I don't know. So the travel aspect that you're talking about and these micro projects, right? They're closer to the ground, right? The giving of a goat to somebody and understanding how that is an appropriate amount of wealth that the family can truly benefit from, rather than something shiny and glittery that beckons and lures one into oblivion.
Yeah, well, power is a narcotic, and everybody likes to get high, and they like to search for heaven and euphoria. And the more you do in that regard, like I've done, you have to watch out, because it goes to your head. But this business, if I may go sideways here a bit about progressives and conservatives, I found a profound lesson talking to a marine iguana in the Galapagos. You know what iguanas do? They bask. They sit there in the sun, and that's it. All they ever do.
Yep.
I found about 10,000 of them, staring me face to face, and not one of them was really expressive. But if you do your homework, as I did in the Galapagos, Darwin espoused his theory of evolution, which is no longer a theory; it's a fact. And what he wrote was, it's not the strongest or the most intelligent of the species that survives, but the one most adaptable to change, adaptation. See, so when his book was finally published, because he knew what a ruckus it would cause when it was published on the origin of species, the leading critic in the world at that time, Herbert Spencer, reviewed it and critiqued it and contradicted it. And he came up with the expression, the strongest of the species,
survival of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest, whatever you can get away with.
Right.
So Darwin's profound observations were immediately twisted to the benefit of people who wanted to justify slavery and dealing opium and all the things that people were doing at that time. But his observations pertain today. There are people who seek power for various reasons. And they say this, the strongest survives. My gun's bigger than your gun. Force works. Look at this. Let's work for me. Look where it's got me. You should do the same. And I say, well, you should study a little bit more, history, because, like the dodo, you're going to become extinct. And if we don't stop exploiting Mother Earth and all the people who live on it for our own benefit, because power goes to your head, you won't be around that much longer, and none of us will be. So when people ask me, oh, did you climb Mount Everest? Did you do this, do that? I said, you know what I've been doing? Conquering my own ego. I have a very strong ego, and I have an enormous willpower, and I can manifest anything I want, and I make it happen. But you better be careful, with what you
wish for.
Yeah.
What you wish for.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of another analogy for meditation, and I don't know if this applies to Buddhists or yogis or all of the above, but it has to do with the spiritual retreat, right? And it's the saying goes, it's all fun and games until somebody loses an eye. Right, talking about the ego and the I, right, the capital I.
Yeah.
So how does one do that? How does one keep that desire for power in check, or that ego-driven thing in check? What method do you use to stay centered, or find an approach that helps you continue to press forward and be successful in that sense, without it being the wrong kind of belief in being a self-made man, or whatever it is that drives the ego?
Well, as I mentioned before, my book is full of anecdotes about things that I've learned and shared with other people and learned from other people. And the very first anecdote given to me that I can remember has stayed in my head ever since. My friend who started this micro philanthropy thing, which has moved into a huge movement, told me the beginning. I said, well, how did this start? And he said, well, my father told me he wanted to explain the meaning of life. I'm 6 years old. And he said, come into the bathroom. I want to talk to you. Oh, the meaning of life's in the bathroom. What's it doing in there? He said, look in the mirror. What do you see? Oh, my face. And he said, look at me. What do you see? Well, you're my father. He says, when you're my age, I want you to look in the mirror and see what you see. And how have you spent your life? Have you wasted it? Have you thrown it away? Have you pissed on it? What have you done with it? It's up to you to look in the mirror. And, I think that's stayed with me ever since. I have a little beard here, but I shave. I look in the mirror every day and I say, okay, what am I going to do today? How can I make the world a better place? And the world is not just a journey. It's an adventure. It's exciting if you think of it that way. It's not just a journey. It's an adventure. Life is an adventure, and you have to look at it that way, saying how exciting it is every day. And wow, it's a brand new movie. Get out there and do your thing. Because what's the alternative? Learning from other people. Just keep your eyes open, and your ears open, and pay attention.
Well, once again, you've given us an absolutely fabulous segue into our next commercial break. Word from our sponsor. A show that deals with exactly that, looking into the mirror through the experiences of others and understanding that path forward. When we come back right after this break, we've got another great question from one of our audience members, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into the mind, the world, the travels of Michael McCarthy, the author of The Transformative Traveler. Stay tuned.
Your story has the power to start a movement. Journalism is more than a tool for broadcasting news. It's an important way of fostering meaningful cultural relationships that create tangible change in our society. With our anthology Cultural Journalism, you can now do your part and make your mark. From expert writers to passionate amateur, everyone has a story to tell. Our aim is to promote equality, empathy, and create a safe space for different perspectives and interpretations of the world around us. Come join us today and break free from the toxic news cycle. By submitting your story to Cultural Journalism at info@soupllc.com.
There's that QR code, and we are back in the studio with Dan Sanderson, who is the host of the Cultural Journalism Show. And the Cultural Journalism Anthology is actually an opportunity, Michael, for people who are interested in what you're talking about and would like to share their stories, to provide a short story about their own micro movement, their own micro approach to transforming the world, and their own unique slice and viewpoint on what's important at this stage. I've decided to go ahead and bring Dan back in so that he can share a couple of words about that of his own as the host of the Cultural Journalism Show, and how it ties into what Michael's saying here.
Thanks, Wade. Yeah, cultural journalism, I had the original vision for cultural journalism as something that was anchored in truth seekers. There's this need, I think, in society to independently investigate the truth. And I think that whatever place society is right now, I know for me, I spend time reading the classics, and that's where I feel that the culture has emerged. So if I get confused, if I'm unsure about party politics, I can go back to philosophy. I can go back to the Hellenic roots, or in the case of this show, I can go back to the beauty of religion. And I think that it can be revealing if somebody spends the time reporting the truth through those lenses, right? I guess that's the way to say it. And there's a grounding there. There's a grounding that somehow takes away all the uncertainty. It doesn't eliminate the uncertainty. It seems that it prepares us. Generations before us have prepared us in a way. And I think it's that studying cultures, okay? Mine usually happens from, I guess, within a philosophy book, sitting at home. It's not out traveling, right? So mine's a little different. I think I would probably take some dollars and donate it to people like Michael that want to go out and affect change in the world that way. I think that's probably a good use of dollars well spent. For me, I like the solitude of my space and my home and my family, but I love hearing things like Michael's talking about, and I see this as a nice complementary space, cultural journalism, for doing that. One thing to think about is that journalism is supposed to be like the watchdog of society. This is the one that is the truth teller.
Yeah, in the U.S., it's called the Fifth Estate.
Right, exactly.
Or the Fourth Estate, maybe. Anyway, yeah.
The fifth, I think.
That hopefully independent observer and reporter of facts and asker of questions. Right.
Now, there was a genre of cultural journalism that came out, and it actually encouraged a participatory approach, immersing yourself in the subjective part of it. And although I don't think that should be the entire function of journalism, I think that the journalism per se that Wade's talking about, like the Fifth Estate, this is professional journalism as we know. This is when we have the politicians that stand up in front of us telling us something, and we want to have professional journalists question them in a way that reveals the truth, that enhances democracy. Cultural journalism, and on the other hand, I think is something that's just more immersive, truth-seeking in more of a societal way, right? Because we're not always on trial, right? We're not always on trial. So this allows us to break bread together, sit at a table across from each other and exchange stories as friends, right? This is something that I'm sure, Michael, you must have, and also Wade as well, right? I mean, you must have had that kind of experience of walking into a room, engaging with somebody's, dare I say, soul as a philosopher. I do. I have a particular revelation on that. And it's about tapping into people for who they are, where they are, and why they are. And I think that's valuable.
Well, thanks, Dan. I'm gonna now show that question and invite Michael to sort of open this up and unpack it for the everyday man, for the average woman, or young person who is in any way inspired by what we're talking about and wants to experience some of it. Here, we're asked, what is the easiest way to become a transformative traveler?
Okay, well, I think the definition of travel has to be redefined. You don't need to go around the world. You don't need to go anywhere. You just need to achieve a certain state of mind that when you walk out your front door, you have an attitude. And then all of a sudden the world becomes very rich. So when I was young, my mother took me to Bible school, and I went to church, and I went and studied the New Testament and the Old Testament in school. And the one thing I do remember is the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which is the King James Version. And I translate that into treat people the way you would like to be treated. So every interaction that I have on a daily basis, walking out my front door, talking to neighbors, people on the street, I put myself in their shoes. I'm never condescending, and I always try to think of something that will make people laugh. I just came back today, and I went to Value Village to buy some cheap clothes, and I made this lady from Europe who didn't speak English laugh 3 times. And we were talking about my discount. I said, look, I can't count to 10 without taking off my socks. You can figure out the damn discount. So everything you do.
Are you missing a finger there, Michael? My father is missing 2 fingers.
I'm the only person I've ever met who got 0 out of 100 in algebra. So actually, I got my name right. So when you walk out the door, what's that old hippie expression? It's all a trip, man. It is. It's a voyage. It's an expedition. It is whatever you want to make of it. So no, you don't need to do a tremendous advanced planning and save up all this money and do. You can, and yeah, for sure. But start small. So when you meet that person on the street who's begging, or that person in working at a minimum wage awful job, just put yourself in their shoes, think how they think, and then respond appropriately. And my wife is getting fed up with it. So she says, it's like living with Robin Williams. You're an endless comedian. And I go, yeah, I am. But I think of it in advance. This poor person's been sitting there for 8 hours listening to complaints. I go, right. How much are you charging for rutabagas? Come on. So humanize them and treat people the way you would want to be treated, and it'll open up.
Do a little traveling right in your backyard. See, if you will, the face of God in every human being that you meet, rather than some version. It's funny because the saying, when you point a finger, 3 are pointing back at you. And as you really look deeply around what goes on, especially in today's hyper visible social media enabled world, right? It's very easy to see that on steroids, right? And so, we might get irritated with those aspects of ourselves that we see in other people, or we might get irritated at the otherness, right? The thing that is different that we can't relate to. But why are we getting irritated at all, right? How can we adopt that attitude of respect versus disrespect of those other human beings? No matter what, no matter who they are. Where does that come from? How do we achieve that? I think that's part of what you're talking about with transformative traveling. I know that when I was younger, I was really into languages. Through my own personal circumstances, I learned Swedish unexpectedly by being dropped into a Swedish family at age 9 without speaking a word of Swedish. And strangely enough, the country expected me to change. And so I had to learn Swedish. And but it triggered something, and it made it easy for me to learn languages. So I went on to study French, and did very well at that with minimal training. And then I ended up living in Germany, and I became fluent. And then while I was in Germany, I studied Russian. And so for a while, languages were my thing. But that experience of being plopped into a Swedish household, and to your point about Darwin, adapting and I adapted really well. I mean, literally, I would dream in these different languages, and I became an interpreter, right? I would actually, like those people at the UN that they hear one language and they speak in a different one, but I could interpret back and forth between these different languages. I would have a headset on like this. I'd be hearing in one language and I'd be speaking into a microphone in the other language. And I was very good at it. I was in demand. And it was really my life. But the reason I was excited about it, and I did live in these different countries as well, is that I was fascinated by the different viewpoints of these people. I could relate to them. Perhaps it was even a little bit of self-loathing. I was born in Canada. I ended up in America. I had a lot of challenges as a kid. Didn't really know where I belonged. And so I enjoyed being in those different cultural situations. They were stimulating, they were educational, and I became very good at understanding where the other person was coming from. And not just being able to interpret the words, but be able to interpret what was going on and what they were trying to achieve, and why it was difficult, for people to communicate. So you're becoming not just a translator, but a brokerer of, building a bridge between those people. And all that was very, very rewarding to me. In desiring to find out how different people can work together and complement each other while remaining distinct and different. I never, became a German at all when I was living in Germany. But I actually passed myself off as one when I was, in different countries. When I was in East Germany, for example, I could pass myself off as a West German. That's how enculturated I was into the German society. But I retained my own identity while having a deep respect for those other people and those other cultures and the different ways of thinking of their language. I've been off on a little monologue here, but I just wanted to throw all that out there in response to that question I asked. How does one learn to grow in respect, real respect, not just tolerance, not just coexistence, or not embracing it for selfish or political reasons, but what the Indians call namaste, right? The light in me salutes or greets or respects the light in you. The spirit in me salutes and greets the spirit in you. How does one achieve that? And I assume that's part of what transformative traveling, in your definition, might assist with.
Well, as always, the only way I can answer any question is through personal experience, anecdotes, and stories. So a great many of my trips, I learned a long time ago how to get press trips. I mean, traveled the world extensively, being treated like a god, 5-star everything. You get bored with that after a while. But imagine this, picture this. I'm in a van with 8 other travel writers and a driver and a translator, and we're doing this trip. And for many of the people, I'm saying this through experience, it's just a glorified holiday or vacation for them. I want champagne, I want chocolate, I want a massage, I want the best and everything, which they will give you, so that you will write about that. And and it's free advertising for them. But I used to think, sitting there in that van with 8 other writers and a driver, within one day you can identify who's the crank, who's the complainer, who's the joke or whatever. You're in that van and you get out of that van. This is your once in a lifetime opportunity to be someone else. Nobody knows what a rotten, awful person you are. You can be whoever you want. You just have to decide in advance, next time I'm going to be less of a complainer.
Pain in the butt. Yep.
Yeah. So it's the same for everybody. Every day you wake up and say, well, okay, everybody thinks of me of such a, such a way. Well, no one knows who you are. So next time, choose to be a better person.
Wow.
The Dalai Lama, I've studied an awful lot of religions myself. I love the Dalai Lama. Choose to be an optimist. It feels better. There's 3 pieces of wisdom in one sentence. Choose it. bring it into mind, conscious awareness, okay? And then make the decision. No one is happy unless they decide to be happy. And then the third thing is, well, it feels better. So
since you mentioned the Dalai Lama, I want to provide a personal anecdote to underscore and cement what you just said. If you are a person, on that bus, one of those 8 people who isn't well liked because you're a putz or whatever word we want to use, whose fault is that? To your point, you can decide to change. So here's the anecdote to just sort of underscore the power of that. And this really happened. I had written my first 2 books, and I was stuck. I didn't know how to land this plane. And I got it in my head because of all my own travels, right? I had been to the Dead Sea, the lowest point on Earth. I had been to South Africa. I had been in Alaska. I lived in a tent in Alaska for a year. Well, no, that's an exaggeration.
You're crazy. You're nuts.
10 months. 10 months. No, at that point in time, I didn't really have a choice. I mean, I did have a choice. I could have called Child Protective Services, and they would have come and rescued me from what I was being put through. But this was my senior year in high school. And 10 months in a tent in Alaska, 20 below weather. But I'd been to South Africa, I'd been to Alaska, I'd been I'd been around the world. And I suddenly got it in my head. I've been to the lowest point there, Dead Sea. I needed to go to the highest point, and I wanted to meet the Dalai Lama. And I just somehow got it into my head that I had to make this trek, and I was looking into flights and trains and whatnot to actually get there to meet him. And it's crazy because I had a wife and a little baby, but I got it. I got to do this. I got to do this. And then, lo and behold, I live in Madison, Wisconsin, and the Dalai Lama has this relationship with the University of Madison to study prayer and brainwaves. And so the universe, instead of making me go to see him, they brought him to me. And he came to Madison, and I went to see him when he spoke and gave this lecture. So, funny story, true story, right? You do have the power. Even then, as crazy as it seems, I honestly believe that I was empowered to be able to do this, and it broke the log jam, and I was able to then complete my trilogy and move on without having to go all the way to Tibet and meet with and try somehow mysteriously to actually meet the Dalai Lama. He was brought to me. So I love, earlier you said just do it. I love the fact that every day is a fresh day. And your great analogy about being on that travel bus and just deciding to be different, because they've said that about the internet today, right? Anybody can represent themselves differently on the internet. The dog can be a cat or whatever. I'm not getting the examples right, but you guys know what I'm talking about. Like never before in human history, we do have the power to create and shape our destiny, who we want to be, and how we want to be, and to fulfill that commandment that you spoke about, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? Treat other people the way you want to be treated. And that alone can begin that transformative journey. We're nearing the end of the show. We're actually already over time, but this has been absolutely fascinating. I want to just give you time to react to that. And then I want to go to one more quick commercial break and wrap up. So what else can you add to that sort of idea that you introduced about every day when you wake up, you can choose to be different? What are some additional examples of the kinds of transformation that you've seen in yourself or others through your efforts at transformative travel?
Well, yeah. Cheap commercial break here. I'm going to tell everyone read my book because there's hundreds of anecdotes and stuff in there.
And put your comments in the chat because there's still a chance to win a free copy of it.
Yeah.
Just do it. Take charge. You can do it. Just engage. We're looking for some more great comments.
We're talking a lot about micro philanthropy and how you can interface with other people on your journey through life. And life is an adventure. And if you have the state of mind that everything is exciting and you bring it all to, conscious awareness, to my mind, that's everything. You and I are old enough to know the name of Baba Ram Dass. He was the guy who wrote "Be Here Now" in the hippie generation. You know, wherever you are, be there. And I am huge on conscious awareness, so I don't need to go.
Those who are
on a
younger
trip.
know the Oasis song by that name, but yeah, go ahead.
I don't need to go anywhere around the world. I just need to walk out, my front door. So it's all an attitude. So, I have a book about trees, Vancouver trees where I live. And I bring that with me. I said, look at that tree. And my wife's into architecture. Is that Victorian or Edwardian? Pay attention to your life and don't spend your whole time talking to yourself. In one of my books, Amazing Adventures, it's called, the story's called A Message from the Head Budgie. And that's me. Mikey's the budgie. And the budgie wakes up in the morning and he's talking in the mirror and preening, and he's got his message for the day to send to all the other budgies. It's like waiting for Godot because it's a holiday and the budgie never, or the butler never shows up. So he's getting angry. He's talking to himself. And that's the whole story. There's no ending. So don't be a budgie bird. Look at the world every day. Be interested in anything or everything. I mean, I'm not interested in everything, but I'm interested in whatever I see. And the clue, according to Baba Ram Dass, is to sink into your incarnation deeply, like a hummingbird after a flower. Get the nectar. Go for the gold. Don't disturb yourself or distract yourself with all these irritations. Keep it in mind. Mindfulness. See, my travel is basically, I divide it between mindless and mindful. Do I want to go to Cancun and get drunk on the beach? What the hell for? Didn't I? I've been there, done that. Mindful. Oh, that's where the nectar comes out. That's where the juice is. So you want to, wallow in that and share it with everyone. Everyone is interested in something, but if you're interested in everything, then you could talk to anyone. And, the world is an amazing place, but you have to keep your eyes open and your mouth shut. Stop talking to yourself like a budgie bird and pay attention.
Wonderful. And once again, you've done it. You've given the perfect segue into our final commercial break here. So this one is from the Royal Falcon Foundation, which specializes in providing that kind of experience for 11 to 15-year-olds in particular, and families as a whole. The Royal Falcon Foundation has developed experiential camp programs that take your young people and entire families away from the phones, away from the screens, away from that day-to-day life, and allow them to dig deep into experiences and access that nectar and understand what that's like, even at a young age. We'll play this quick commercial break, and then we'll be back to get some final words of wisdom from Michael McCarthy, Dan Sanderson, as well as hopefully a few more comments and questions or input from the audience, because remember, there's a free copy of Michael's book still to be had. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the Royal Falcon Foundation. Our curriculum and activities inspire and train adolescents through hands-on experiences, fostering growth and empowerment. Through immersive and challenging experiences, we shape young minds to think independently and develop their leadership skills. Our programs foster new friendships and unity, shaping young leaders to tackle real-world challenges with confidence. We believe in equipping the next generation with the skills to become leaders of tomorrow. Join us at the Royal Falcon Foundation and be part of a journey that empowers, unites, and inspires. Visit our website and embrace a world of possibilities today. RoyalFalconFoundation.com.
And there's that QR code. I'm not sure where it takes you, but this very coming weekend, we'll have another Royal Falcon Foundation sponsored activity right here on our property in Brooklyn, Wisconsin. We're teaming up with That Zen Farm that has 19 horses that are used for therapy. And these horses are amazingly effective at helping children find that stillness, children and young people. This camp is focused on 10 to 15-year-olds. And at that Zen farm, you'll have the experience of learning to relate to that horse and lead that horse through body language without even having to touch the horse, through an obstacle course. And then on the second day of the camp, you will participate in a leadership course designed around the animal kingdom, in which the various attributes of different animals will result in challenges that individuals and the entire team must overcome through understanding and learning what the characteristics and traits of that animal are. I don't know where this QR code takes you. It might take you to then the next event, which is down in Arizona at the Desert Rose Baha'i Institute, where we have an entire immersive family program scheduled for October. It's a Friday, October 18th till Sunday, October 20th, I believe it is. Anyway, use that QR code or send an email to info@soupllc.com, and we will share more about that. I want to circle back then on one point, because one of the stations in the obstacle course is the canine, the dog station. And we talked about Darwin earlier, and there's that survival of the fittest idea, right? Which you mentioned is not at all what Darwin was trying to share. But there's also this phrase this used to be in popular parlance, dog eat dog. Well, I learned years ago, dogs don't really eat dogs. And as part of the course, we learned that dogs are not even like wolves. Dogs actually don't focus on the alpha male thing. Dogs are more interested in play. Dogs don't even fight, because dogs know that when dogs fight, dogs get hurt. And it hurts the herd. It hurts the community of the dogs. I mean, this is real. Dogs don't eat dogs at all. They're like the opposite. They're like fun-loving puppies at heart that just want to play and just want to be loyal to each other. They don't fight for dominance. They don't seek to become the alpha male. But it's interesting how we think they do because of common parlance. And so just studying a little bit into the actual nature of animals, being observant, perhaps the way Darwin was, might be quite an education. And we'll provide a little bit of an immersive dip into that at the camp, including the dolphin challenge, where you'll be figuring out what dolphins need to learn in the pool. So I do want to get that out there for anyone who's interested. So having said all that, Michael and Daniel, what else can we mine? What other nectar can we draw from having Michael on the show today to talk about transformative leadership? Actually, I keep saying that because at the Royal Falcon Foundation programs, we use parts of the transformative leadership curriculum that was developed at Noor University, including some of the 17 capabilities of leadership. We don't really work with the full curriculum, but I keep thinking of transformative leadership whenever I try to reference your book, Transformative Traveling, The Transformative Traveler. So Dan, Michael, take us home.
Well, I'll go first, I suppose. I think of transformation, and I think of let's scaffold for all of us here with Wade and Michael and myself. What if we get somebody in the room that says, "I'm good. I don't need to be transformed. I'm an ethically outstanding, revered citizen." Is this what do we say to that? Is it a constant sort of transformation, a constant improving, or is there somebody that can essentially arrive at that place? What are you thinking, Wade?
Normally, I would jump in and speak right now, but I'm not going to, because Michael told me I should be listening more. So I'm going to start that transformation right now, right here and now, and let Michael talk.
Hard to keep track of all these questions, but in terms of the person who's already perfect, why don't you share your perfection with other people and teach them how to do it? I guess we're running out of time, so I'm sorry. I'm just a storyteller, so I got to do a horse story. This thing about falcon.
We can keep going. No one's gonna.
Okay.
Shut you off.
All the hundreds and endless questions I've had. I've done so many dude ranches and guest ranches. I mean, I don't like riding horses because I always say if I want my ass kicked, I'll go play football. But I learned an amazing lesson from a horse whisperer one time at a guest ranch. I don't know if any of the listeners or viewers here have seen the movie The Horse Whisperer which was Robert Redford many years ago, about how he was able to take in a very badly abused horse and get it to calm down. And that's what people think about a horse whisperer is. You take these abused horses and you make them whole again. Not true. I met a horse whisperer, a real one time, Mary, on a guest ranch in British Columbia. And what she told me was beyond. I mean, she said, a horse whisperer has got nothing to do with horses. It's the client that we get here. I had a woman come in here recently who was completely blind and had no self-confidence. And we taught her that the horses are a mirror of your soul. You can't speak English to them. You transfer your information to them telepathically. So I'm going to teach you how to talk to the horses so that you can get them to walk into a circle. You can get them to come and go and sit down without saying a word. And it transformed this woman. It gave her the confidence that she needed in real life. And the opposite end was this abusive executive director who had been told to go take a holiday, take a break, and came to her camp. And she said, the horses are a mirror of your soul. Your abusive ego and power scare the shit out of these horses. Look how they behave. And while we were talking, she said, look around, Michael. How many horses do you count? I said, only about 20 of them. What are they doing? She said, they're all lying down. Their ears are open and they're looking and listening to you. And they're calm because you are calm and respectful of them. That's horse whispering. It's a therapy, not for the horses, because you're the one with the problem. Horses are a mirror to your soul. So that's a lesson I'll never forget.
Thank you for sharing that. I think Marcy, the owner and operator of that Zen farm, would completely agree with you. We went and met with her, and she described what she does there with the horses. There's one of the oldest ones is his name is Gandalf, and she told us a couple of stories about how Gandalf has helped young people and children who were the ones who were abused and the ones who had learning disabilities or conditions and tears were rolling down my cheeks as she was telling these stories. And you could tell that this was real, that this was happening. And like you, my experiences with horses have largely been negative, and I think that says something about me. But we really want to offer that gift to those who come to this camp here this weekend, to have that experience and to share that experience with them, getting back to what you've been saying. So Michael, Daniel, this has been an amazing experience for me to listen and learn and participate in this discussion about transformative traveling. Might be something that's not immediately accessible on the surface and a travel writer just writing another book. But I think we've seen through what you've shared, Michael, that it's so much more than that. And we have one thing left to do today, which is make sure that one of these people who commented is selected. I don't know if you're able to go over and look at the entire chat. I can share some of the ones we've shared before. The question from Fuad, what fears you still have to overcome, which you answered. The easiest way to become a transformative traveler. Here's another one that came on very early when you were talking about On the Road. I read most or all of On the Road, and I guess the Dharma Bums as a young teen too. That also was an impetus for quite a bit of hitchhiking later. So your pick there, Michael, about which one you would like to go ahead and Something Other Publishing, the sponsor of the show, will pick up the tab and get a book sent out to them.
Okay, well, I'm certainly
back with their address.
I'm certainly not going to advise anyone to pick up hitchhiking on the road and stuff. I was heavily influenced by it, and it got me to travel. But
Here's the guy you really want to give the book to, because this is the best comment of all. Give it to Antonson. I am going to buy the book. You go, Fuad. Thank you so much. And for the purpose of Fuad being enabled to just do it, there is that important barcode, which will allow it to be immediately scanned and immediately go and carry through on that promise of buying that book. So we'll just leave that up here as we wrap up.
Well, great. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my favorite.
There's Fuad's favorite pick.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to share my favorite word, which is share. That denotes equality between people. So on your journey through life, whether it's around the block or anywhere else, and do it 50-50. We're both equal. You have your life, I have mine. And if we can find ways to talk to each other, that's the way to open the door and go from there. And when you open doors, who knows what will happen behind that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. So looks like we're going to award that book to B. Antonson. Send us your mailing address. Claim that book. I will put the email address right here in the chat that you need to send in your mailing address to lay claim to that book. So B. Antonson, send your email to info@soupllc.com, claim that book, and we'll get it shipped right out to you. That's it for tonight's show. Next week, same place, same time, we will be meeting with Roy Leatham, discussing the topic of theology and human dignity. Roy Leatham has leveraged his degree in theology as a springboard to practicing religion as described in James 1, verse 7, pure and undefiled, which is to visit the widows and orphans in their affliction and keep oneself unspotted from the world. But also, he's used it as a lens through which to view society and social progress. The big questions in this arena are, what does it mean to visit in their affliction? And what exactly does unspotted from the world look like? Join us as Roy Leatham shares his perspective on that important question next week, same time, same place. And once again, we'll be giving away a book and inviting you to engage directly with the authors and guests. So thank you for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place. In the meantime, become a transformative traveler. Change your life. It can be done easily, as Michael has pointed out tonight. Good night, everyone.